Welcome to the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification and Cybersecurity Challenges for South Carolina Businesses Seminar. CMMC is a big deal. If you want to do business with the United States Department of Defense, you've got to be CMMC compliant. That is if you're an individual, a business, or university. Today, we've got experts, real experts, who are going to go over everything you need to be CMMC compliant, as well as discuss the cybersecurity challenges that face our business community and things that can be done to improve those cyber defenses. If you've got questions, we have an online chat. Please put your questions in there. And at the end of the program, we'll have our experts on to answer those questions. I particularly want to thank those entities here in South Carolina who have come together to put this on for our business community. The South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance, Clemson University, Limestone University, and Cape Endeavors. And I think what it shows is that we here in South Carolina have the capability to meet the cyber security challenges that this country faces. And I also want to thank the United States Small Business Administration, who has announced this and sent materials out to small businesses throughout the state as well. At this time, we want to welcome Governor Henry McMaster, the governor of South Carolina, who has made cybersecurity a priority for this state, and Governor McMaster will give the welcoming remarks. Governor McMaster.
Hello, this is Governor Henry McMaster, and I want to add my welcome to you today. What you're doing is vital in ensuring that our state and country are fully protected against cyber threats, foreign and domestic. Cyber attacks have devastating potential. They lack borders, involve adversaries with evolving tactics and no conscience, and they endanger everything from homes and families to businesses, industry, to medicine, natural resources, and national security. We must stay alert and stay ahead. That is why we must take this opportunity to prioritize cybersecurity certification in industry and government. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor McMaster. And our next speaker is someone who is a national treasure who lives in South Carolina. Ken Bible, years ago, was instrumental in Spay War in Charleston, putting together some of their cybersecurity capabilities. He was the Deputy CIO of the United States Marine Corps and recently retired as the Chief Information Security Officer for the United States Department of Homeland Security, and he lives right here in South Carolina. And Kim will give an overview of the current federal cybersecurity landscape. Ken Bible.
All right, good morning, and thank you for having me. Thanks for the kind remarks, Van. Give me a thumbs up, make sure that I'm being heard there in the room. That'd be great. Very good. All right. So good morning, everyone. Again, thank you for allowing me to come and join this session this morning to talk with you just as an overview of some of the landscape of cybersecurity in the federal sector, as well as maybe just some notes about my own view of CMMC and how that's evolved. You'll hear more about this during the day, but what you may not realize is how long the CMMC journey has been going on and really the nature of what drove its existence. First, let's highlight the fact that CMMC is not implementing any new requirements. The requirements from the deforest clauses for the Department of Defense have been in existence for 25 years. And that is not only for DoD, but for the entire civilian federal sector as well. And so the realization came some 20 years ago around the revelation of data that was being handled by contractors manufacturing some of the most sensitive and important weapons platforms in this country. In particular, you probably heard of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, that there were sensitive data that was leaking out from both the subcontractors and I think in some cases you would probably look back at the prime contractors as well, that there was data theft that was going on. That really highlighted the issue of needing to protect the controlled but unclassified information of the federal government at all levels. And the CUI regulation, the CUI, controlled unclassified information, is a broad area, and it encompasses a lot of other information handling instructions that used to exist separately, things like not releasable for foreign nationals, no foreign, or for official use only, or law enforcement sensitive. All of these were grouped into a single category called controlled but unclassified information by an executive order. And so the CMMC came about as a recognition of the need to ensure that industry was actually employing the right security measures to protect the sensitive data of the nation. This came about as we've gone along. We've seen the threat increase as well. So not only has the fact that information on weapon systems could be tampered with or could be exfiltrated, but the cyber threat has grown as well. So now we not only have the potential, and seeing it fairly frequently, for defense contractors to be exploited, but importantly to this audience, it's manufacturing's impacts that can really have a tremendous impact on other things in the economy. I like to talk about some of these things as really national security risks. Take, for example, the Colonial Pipeline exploit from several years ago. It really did not involve an exploitation or damaging the control systems of the fuel oil pipelines of the nation, or along the East Coast anyway. But by the fact that there was an attack on the systems of Colonial Pipeline, they chose to shut down a large part of their network. And the supply chain impacts of the lack of fuel on the East Coast, we all probably remember that holiday season, that particular summertime gap in our ability to get fuel. So every industry is now being impacted. And it's not simply the IT, the information technology that you use in your business processes, but now the threats are flowing over into the operational technology, the manufacturing technologies that are being used. So a recent joint notice by the FBI, Cybercom, and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, CISA, spoke to a group called Volt Typhoon, which is actually targeting a whole range of these types of systems. Living off the land is the term that's being used in terms of exploiting vulnerable routing and networking systems, even to the point of being able to go in and leverage vulnerable legacy surveillance cameras in order to be able to gain insights into the operations of different organizations. So this is not something that's just a problem for the federal government. It's not just a problem for industry. It's a whole of nation challenge that we need to rise to. So I bring that up by the need to really think about cybersecurity differently. It's actually become table stakes to doing business with the government. When I was at DHS, what I did learn in working on the civilian sector side was that some of the implications of CMMC in its higher levels, particularly the third-party assessment, really had an impact upon the small businesses that DHS in particular relied upon, but that other parts of the federal government and the civilian sector dealt with. And so I was working on means to assess the cyber readiness, the cyber maturity of these small businesses in some different ways. And some great dialogue ensued with DoD, and I think they've taken on board some of the things that we discussed, and certainly I know that small businesses were talking to their representatives about the potential impacts and costs being driven by CMMC. But all this to say, CMMC, as Van alluded to, is not going away. There's a call to action for manufacturers, for at all levels of size and scope, whether you're building a weapons system, or whether you're building an accounting system, or whether you're doing help desk functions for a federal agency, need to focus in on their cybersecurity readiness. And in reality, the level 1 controls that are implemented by CMMC really strike me as pretty common sense. And there's 12 controls in that level 1 assessment. That is a self-assessment to start. Those range from, I'll boil it down to 3 things. Knowing what devices are on your network, knowing who are using those devices, and knowing that those devices are actually in a proper patch and configuration state to be secure. Now, there's more to it than that, but this is not something that's esoteric to DoD. This is common sense cybersecurity. So I really would like to go make this a call to action. And what you're going to hear about today and hopefully learn from this webinar will help you to take some immediate steps to understand what your cybersecurity posture is. Understand how important it is for you, and I talk about it at every level of the organization as well. This is down to the worker level all the way up to the C-suite. To have an understanding of how cybersecurity and cyber vulnerabilities can impact the business. So the first thing is to really review and update what your cybersecurity practices are. Call in your cybersecurity experts. If you have a chief information security officer, put them on the docket at your next board meeting and have them come and give you an assessment of where the company is at. I really do encourage that if you do intend to do work for DoD, go ahead and start working on the self-assessments for level 1. As I said, this is not esoteric cybersecurity. This is practical, very sound practices in cybersecurity that every business should be taking to heart. And they are table stakes in terms of being in business, because if you are victimized by ransomware, or you are in a supply chain that gets tainted through an adversary action, you don't want to be the one who is held accountable for that. And I'll talk in a second about those accountability pieces. But start to view cybersecurity as a key part of your business. This is not a cost center anymore. This is about being able to stay in business, because the statistics show that particularly for small businesses, a vulnerability or a ransomware attack or some attack, the reputational damage or the ability or inability to get cyber insurance after such an attack can be existential for your business. So I really do encourage you to take a start at looking at the self-assessments for level 1. I think the framework that DoD's come out with, CMMC, is sound in terms of those basic practices, and it'll put you in a good place for wherever you want to go work within the federal government. Now, I didn't want to leave without talking about some of the ramifications within the federal space. And some of that may change as we see the change in administration, but I think by and large that both parties really do see this in the same light. Don't want to speak for anybody in those positions now, but I think we're seeing a coalescence around the fact that companies need to be accountable for their cybersecurity. They need to be accountable for handling the information of the government. And to that end, it has an impact on investors as well. So the Securities Exchange Commission has started to go hold corporate officials accountable for the cybersecurity posture or lack thereof by requiring reporting if you have a cybersecurity incident that significantly impacts the material or has a material effect on the company. That becomes a public record. So you're not going to, and if you don't report those incidents, I can see that there's going to be some potential actions taken against those individuals that fail to report these material incidents in the organization. If you're working for a federal government agency, the issue gets a little bit even more challenging because of things like the False Claims Act. False Claims Act is actually been around for a while now, goes back to 1986. But it basically allows even a whistleblower to call out where a company is deliberately falsifying statements to the government in the work that they're doing. And just in the last couple of years, that law has been applied to by the Department of Justice to cybersecurity. So in the current state, Georgia Tech is in the midst of a False Claims Act against them for misstating the posture, their cybersecurity posture, in work they were doing for the federal government. The Department of Justice has now taken up that case. Just recently, another university actually agreed to pay out a fine of $1.25 million for a similar cybersecurity claim that was shown to be false, and that they were then prosecuted for by the Department of Justice. I think these types of efforts are going to continue to be seen as we move into more advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, and where the need to understand what data you are using, what data you are controlling, and the outputs of your systems and how they impact upon the federal government are become clearer. So I really do think that the landscape has changed. We're no longer in a mode where I can do a self-assessment and put the cybersecurity documentation on the shelf. That's another key point. Cybersecurity is a journey. It's not a once and done. So make it a regular part of what you review with your cybersecurity program leads. Focus on it when you're talking to your employees, because most cybersecurity incidents, I'll make that as a general statement, most cybersecurity incidents, particularly in the ransomware world, are caused by user error. It's a phishing attack, or it's an exploitation of a weak password, or it's the failure to use things like two-factor authentication to access critical systems. On the operational technology side, take a close look at the legacy systems. We've all dealt with, and there's thousands of vendors whose operational technologies, programmable logic controllers, and other things that have been put in place and have been in place for decades, and they've never been upgraded. And now we have this desire to go bring that data into the network so that it can be processed on our IT systems. Well, ask hard questions about how you're going to secure that when that happens. There are ways to do this, but we have to be very cognizant. As executives, we have to ask the right questions. Just viewing the fact that we're all responsible for cybersecurity, and that an impact on one can have a broader impact on others. So with that, I'd like to go turn the presentation back over to your speakers today. I think you're going to have a great day talking about CMMC, because as I mentioned, CMMC is a important framework. It is aimed at the Department of Defense. I do think that some of the same controls, actually they do, the same controls apply to your work that you're doing for other parts of the government as well, the federal civilian sector. So meeting the standards of level 1 for CMMC and improving your cybersecurity posture overall is only going to benefit you. Remember that the control and the safety of controlled unclassified information is not all within federal systems. There's tons of controlled unclassified information that rests within industry's systems. There's sensitive information that you may be developing, designs or data that could be exploited by an adversary. So this is, again, a whole of nation approach to securing our controlled but unclassified information. So I thank you for your attention to me this morning. I hope I can be with you in person at a future event. I hope that you get a great deal out of the presentations today, and I look forward to seeing how this group of manufacturing experts evolves over time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken, for your insights. That was great. Two of the things I want to mention as we begin to have some of the panels. When your panel's called, the panelists will come down front. We've got the chairs set up here. Also, at the conclusion, this entire program, the seminar, will be posted online. Clemson University is going to be doing that as part of their land grant mission as a resource tool for South Carolina businesses. Our next speaker is someone who has been in the forefront, both on active duty in the Army and with the National Security Agency. as a real cyber expert and one who grasped early on the significance of CMMC. And we look forward to hearing from Terry McGraw, president of Cape Endeavors, why CMMC is important to you in the current landscape. Terry?
Outstanding. Yeah, actually, it may be just easier for me to stand up here and do this. That way the camera doesn't need to follow me around. So let's begin. Why CMMC? So let's take a real quick step back. Nation state espionage has been a thing since nations were formed, right? It went from tribe to nation, culture to culture, empire to empire. But up until the mid to late 20th century, these efforts were largely bespoke and very human driven, right? It was humans observing other humans, and there was not the ability for scale up until the modernization of the 20th century. So let's just look at it in a very short period of time. So 1969, the Advanced Research Projects Agency creates ARPANET, the first packet switch network designed for communications after a nuclear strike, right? It was designed for redundant communication. 1981 to 83, you had Vint Cerf create the TCP/IP protocol stack, right? That's where modern internet protocols were born. So Vint Cerf then is followed on by Tim Berners-Lee at the CERN laboratory, who then creates the idea of the World Wide Web. And by 1991, Tim Berners-Lee releases the first web browser, and boom, the internet as we know it today and international commerce was born. It's a very, very short period of time. And so when you ask Vint Cerf, he's quoted as saying, when someone asked him, hey, what's the one thing that you knowing what you know now, you would have done differently? And he said, I would have thought about security when I built that thing. And it is one of the things that we've tried to be bolting on ever since. And so along with that, the nation state espionage piece that's gone along with the interconnectedness of our world, because with that interconnection allowed espionage at scale. So nation state to nation state, but now leveraging these technologies and capabilities in a scale that we've never seen before in human history. We now have an interconnected world. But that lays a significant problem for all of us in this arena, because we now support our nation states in the industries and commercial sectors that we participate in. And so when we look at how the threat landscape has evolved as well in that very short period of time, right? So for every new technology, there's someone willing to exploit it. So that beyond the nation state actors, and when Russia has a very significant cyber capability and espionage, China, Iran, North Korea, not to mention our Five Eyes partners, all have significant capabilities within the cyber arena. Well, what we've seen emerge is a very large, very robust, very capable cybercrime network. And when you look at the motivations of cyber groups, we talk about cyber threat actors. Well, nation states, clearly it's about industrial and governmental espionage. Hacktivists are, ideologically driven. People who don't like genetically modified crops, for example, attack, companies that participate in that arena. Insiders are usually disgruntled employees, or they're looking for financial gain. And then cybercrime is all about the Benjamins. It's literally the fastest path to monetization by stealing your hard-earned work. But why is that fitting into the CMMC category? Well, because in that cybercrime network, we've now seen an explosion of attacks across the world. Last year alone, 33,000 victims of ransomware attacks last year alone, globally. Talking about billions of dollars. One of the largest transfers of wealth in human history is happening because of cybercrime. Why is that relevant to the CMMC discussion? Well, in the advent of the cybercrime activity, there's an extortion pathway, right? We call this the Trail of Tears of ransomware engagements, right? This is the name and shame playbook. So it used to be ransomware or cybercrime organizations. So let's step back. In the early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was all about banking, Trojan, and theft of PCI data. We got good at tokenizing that. We got good at encrypting that. Banks got much better at defending their infrastructure. So the evolution happened to ransomware. Hollywood Hospital, New York Police Department, early victims of ransomware, early proofs of concept. I no longer have to have that entire money laundering scheme to get to the monetization of that data. I can just hold you hostage. I encrypt your environment, lock you up, and you pay me to get the keys to your operations back. Well, then that we got better at backups. We started to be more resilient in our operations. So then it became a data theft as a second layer of extortion. So now I'm stealing your data. Well, first, in any breach, there's going to be a necessary component of data extraction. Why? Well, I'm going to get into your environment. So let's say I send you a phishing email. You click on it. It has a quackbot infection. That infection then queries the user. The user said, hey, come to this hyperlink, fill out your W-4 form. We're getting into tax season. Need you to update it. They go in, they enter their username and password, prompts them for their MFA token. They enter it. Next thing you know, the quackbot is now launched in the environment, and it will test every one of your security controls within a matter of minutes. But part of that operation is the exfiltration of credentials off the box that was infected. The threat actor takes those credentials out. They break the hash. They come back in with the credentials that are available to them, and then they figure out where they can crosswalk from that environment. If they can harvest privileged credentials, then they just keep elevating until they own the entire network. And then they will then get a foothold in the environment and look for the keys to your kingdom. What looks like it's important to you? What financial data is there? What business information can they be stolen? And all of that is extorted or taken out as an extortion tactic. Of course, and then the pressure is on. Now they're talking to the people that the data has been stolen. They know your customers. They have your personnel data, and so they're using that. So what do they do with that data? Oh, go back one. What happened here? Oh, look. Oh well, it skipped over. Okay, so that data, once it's stolen, it's now out and it's out of the control of you. So let's explain how this works. So initial access broker will come get into your environment. They'll take some of this proof of life data and they'll post it. Let's go back here one. Does this work? No. I was going to wander around, but now I'm not going to anymore. Okay, so the 33,000 victims here all had data stolen. They all had data exfiltrated. And the cybercrime groups are using that extortion, and you're going to negotiate with them. You may or may not pay. How do we know there's 33 victims and how we know most of them paid? Because the initial data was leaked on their leak sites. It says, we have your data. If you don't pay us, we're going to release the rest of the data. And then they hold the rest, they hold you hostage. 33,000 victims were posted, and only about 15% of that 33,000 had the rest of their data dumped. Which means they followed through with the extortion threat, and their data was now publicly exposed. Here's the problem. You're dealing with cyber criminal organizations. Do they delete your data? They say they do, and you take their word for it. And have we seen release of data further on? Not really, because it doesn't work in their business model to do that. But the problem is, if you are working inside the defense industrial base, and your data has been exfiltrated to cybercrime groups, not just nation states, but cybercrime groups, you have no ability to tell the government where that data is gone. Even if you paid the threat actor for the ransom for their promise of deletion of the data, you cannot say, other than to the DoD, your data left my environment. You may not even be able to tell what data that is, how much that data was. You may not even, it may or may not have been exfiltrated, because the forensics for doing this kind of discovery is very sparse when you're doing a cleanup, especially if data's been encrypted. So you may not even be able to tell them how much, what data, what specific data. All you can say is, I've been breached and data left. That's not a good news story for us as commercial entities when we're talking to the DoD. And so the DoD has gotten very, very serious recently on the CMMC program to help us create a framework for not only compliance, but better security and to reduce this. Look, you've seen these before. This wasn't nation state espionage directly to nation state espionage. They weren't stealing this from CIPRNets or the TSA net or NSA net. They were taking this from commercial entities on unclassified networks. It's kind of frightening. The top line are US projects. The bottom are Chinese projects. Look familiar, folks? They're not getting this from the government. They're getting it from us. And so we have an obligation to our nation, to our citizenry, and to national security to get better at this and get better at this quickly. And the CMMC framework helps drive us into that area. So I'm not going to steal the thunder of Mr. Andy Paul, our Chief Technology Officer, as well as a certified assessor for the CMMC. In fact, he's going to beat you down with data and allow you to ask him questions that we haven't seen yet. What does this all mean, though, for us trying to solve the compliance problem? So 1970, 71, George Akerlof, a famous economist, wrote a seminal paper called The Market of Lemons. It's about the asymmetric marketplace dynamic where a person seeking information about a particular service or product is often unable to find out what's actually under the hood. So we refer to lemons in the used car market. It's a perfect example. You go to out buy a car, well, you're seeking information about the car, but you really don't know how well the car operates till you buy it. That's the problem with cybersecurity right now, right? Cybersecurity, as Ken has talked about, we've viewed cybersecurity as an additive. It's a cost. It's a margin hit. I build cars. I don't do cybersecurity. So it's a bolt-on. It's something that we pay for out of margin. We don't really concern ourselves very much with it. We don't understand it. And so then we go try to procure expertise in this market to help us. So now the CMMC framework is a lot to take on. How do you know that the partner that you're seeking actually knows what they're talking about? How do you verify their credentials and their certification capabilities? How do you understand? So it's just like going for a used car. Oftentimes, you don't know the expertise level until you've purchased the product. And so we've got this asymmetric information between, I know more about CMMC than you do, but there's a lot of folks that are claiming that they know a lot about CMMC, and that creates a market disparity. And so the problem for all these folks is we got a rapidly changing governmental compliance environment. We have a whole lot of people entering the market that are saying they're experts who really aren't. And then you have the problem of product discernment. How do you know that the people that you're partnering with actually can help you get not only compliant, keep you compliant, but also improve your security architecture while you're going? And so that's what we now have, is this market of lemons phenomenon. And so doing these kind of seminars and getting more information out there is to help you get enough information so that when you're seeking help and getting CMMC compliant, you have enough information at your disposal to make a good decision, and pick a partner to help you get there, so that you get on the other side successfully. I will turn it now over to Mr. Andy Paul. We're not going to do questions till the end, right, man?
Correct. Okay. Yeah. Andy, come on up. Terry did a great job of introducing him, man. You got about every cybersecurity and CMS certificate of about anybody in this country. But yeah, those watching online, as you have questions, put those in the chat, and we'll be answering those at the end. Andy?
Yes. Can y'all hear me? Okay. So thanks, everybody. So again, my name's Andy Paul. I'm a certified CMMC assessor. We've been through several of the full DIBCAC joint surveillance assessments. So what we've seen a lot of it. We've helped customers through it. We've been through it ourselves. So at the end, again, if you have specific questions, I just want to give you an opportunity. Here's a certified assessor. Free of charge. We'll go and give you responses, specific things about your network, anything like that. Always happy to help. And that's why we're here, as Terry was saying. We're trying to get more information into the market. I want to take a quick look back at CMMC. As Mr. Bible was saying at the beginning, this is not new. It's been around for a long time. If you go back to 2010, the average Clemson freshman isn't even in kindergarten yet. This concept of controlled unclassified information was released via executive order under the Obama administration. One thing that is unique to this versus some of the other programs is how it was then enhanced under the first Trump administration. It was enhanced again under the Biden administration. This is something that's not going away. It's been around for 14 years. Every contract you have has this in it. There's not a contract that goes to the DoD that does not have these requirements in it today. You kind of see as you walk through it, they took a kind of crawl, walk, run approach to this to give the industry time. And then there was even a round of feedback in the 2020, 2021. We moved to CMMC 2.0, which made everything a little bit more achievable for us to got rid of the 5 levels, moved down to 3, made some things a little simpler. And now the final interim rule goes live December 16th of this year. So it is finally here. We are going to start seeing this language in contracts moving forward. So what's it look like going forward from here? There's a 4-phase rollout. So the new rule has 4 phases. Each phase is 1 year in length. The first phase is basically, it starts on December 16th. We're going to require self-assessments for all level 1 and all level 2. And this language is taken from the rule. So I want y'all to see how they intentionally wrote it vague. At the DoD's discretion, they may require a level 2 certification during the first year. During the year 2, phase 2, we're going to require level 2 certifications for all contracts that have CUI. DoD may, at its discretion, allow self-assessments during the second year. And then they may start requiring level 3 assessments during that second year. Phase 3, which begins in December 2026, this one now we're going to require level 2 certification for all contracts and even the option periods that go on. And going back one, if you have a contract and they allow you to not have a certification, the way the rule is written right now, if there's an option years on the end, you have to have it by the option years. So you get a 3-year plus 2 add-on years. You get to 3 years where you can self-assess. You will have to assess by your option years. Phase 3 comes out. Now we're going to require level 2 for certification and option periods. And then level 3 certifications are required for all applicable contracts. And we may allow level 3 to be self-assessed. And then phase 4 is everything's live. We have to be live within 4 years from now. I mean, I'm pretty certain it literally takes an act of Congress to stop that 4 years from happening at this point. So, that's where we are today. We're now rolling into it, 4-year rollout phase to give the industry time. But the piece here is your contracts are coming up. If you have CUI inside of your environment, you are literally on a 2-year time clock at the most. You may be on a 3-month time clock until you're going to have to be certified. So what is it, just kind of stepping back real quick. So what are we talking about when we talk about being certified, self-assessment, what CMMC is? We're going to focus on levels 1, level 2. If you're level 3, you probably know it. And you probably have a whole team dealing with this. So we're going to deal primarily with just levels 1 and level 2. Level 1 is what Ken was saying earlier. It is the most basic hygiene stuff. It's have a username and password. It's don't share accounts. I mean, have MFA, like the basic requirements that you need in place. It covers technically 6 domains worth of controls and 15 total objectives, or 15 total practices and 59 objectives. So when you look at CMMC, you'll see a control, but you don't want to read it. It's not assess at the control. You assess it at the underlying objectives. You have 4 things that make up that control. You don't, when I'm doing an assessment, I don't ask the control question. I go, all 4 of those objectives. If I say yes to all those, I say yes to the control. If I say yes to, or the practice, if I say yes to all the practices, I say yes to the domain. So you start at the bottom level, and that's where you look at. Level 2, 14 domains. So you can see this is much bigger, about 6 times as big when you look at the objective level phase. 110 total practices, 320 objectives, much, much larger. We're going to allow self-assessments for some of those out the gate. So you have to, if you have CUI, in a DFARS contract, you have to be starting to get ready for this, know what your 320 questions are and how to answer them yourself. But if you have the certification, now when it's a certified level 2 assessment, you got to bring somebody like myself in, a certified assessor working for a certified third-party assessing organization. And in each one of those objectives, all 320 objectives, we're going to go in and we're going to test every one of them for sufficiency and adequacy. Are you doing the right thing? And are you doing enough of the right things? Can't get away with some of those tricks like you did with SOC 2, where I would just have one hardened VM say, oh, look at that. And the rest of my network's not. Those go away here. We're going to look at everything that's in scope, make certain that we've sampled enough of the environment. And then finally, we have to look at 2 different assessment methods for every single objective. So I have to examine, meaning read your policies and procedures, take a look at some sort of artifact, I have to interview somebody. So whoever's the person that's supposed to be doing that thing, I have to ask them what it says in your policy. They have to tell me what it said in that other thing there, or I'm going to test it. Generally shoulder surfing, hey, show me this thing happening inside of your environment. One of the really common ones that we're seeing from DibCAC is go to this website, now show me the firewall log in your SIM. You don't have any idea how hard that is. And most companies cannot actually do that, but that is one of the standard kind of test objectives that we're doing today through the DibCAC assessments. So how do you deal with this, right? I'm an organization, I've got this thing impending on me. So you really have 3 strategies. There's 3 generic approaches that you can take. One, you can go through and say, I'm going to lift my entire organization. I'm going to take I'm going to do a gap analysis. I'm going to see where I am for all 320 of those objectives, identify the ones I need to work on. I'm going to work on them. That typically takes an average organization 12 to 18 months for them to get ready for an assessment. It's also typically expensive as you move to FedRAMP products for your CUI assets and all those things. The next approach is the secure enclave. This is the idea of, instead of hardening my network, I'm going to find the CUI in my network, pull it out, create a new network over here that the CUI can go in and just harden that thing, really limit my scope, get as small as possible. This is the fast and cheap method. However, this only works if you only have a couple of people that are dealing with CUI, or everybody does it, but only a little bit of the time. Everybody deals with CUI all the time, then you're more the level one. There's a third option that's coming about for people that are just, their backs against the wall. They fit that strategy one. I need to lift my whole organization, but I simply don't have time to go through and implement it. I build an enclave, then I do a migration into that enclave. So I'll pick my whole environment up, migrate into GCC High or something like that. If you've ever been through one of those, these are rough. It's really just a rip the Band-Aid off approach. You're going to come to work on Monday, nothing's going to work. You work through it that week, and then you're back up and running. That's a very expensive approach, but it is a quick route to solve number three. Really what we want to say here is that there are ways to get there. It's not just an unsolvable problem. We've seen it. We're happy to help, happy to answer questions that you may have to help pick your correct strategy. And then definitely make certain that you're seeking advice. We see it all the time. People come in asking for an assessment. 80% of firms, when they go for their assessment, don't even get past readiness. Fill out the scoping guide. You're not ready. I'm just going to give you a letter. You're wasting your money because I know you're going to fail and you don't want that entered into your EMAS system. So make certain to get the information so that you can make a good, educated decision. Thanks.
Andy, thank you. That was great and really with in order to do business with the Department of Defense, all right there. And again, this will be online. If the panelists would come on down for our panel, and I'll go ahead and call their names as they're coming down. Dr. Nathan Copeland, the president of Limestone University. Dr. Oscar Vasquez Melendez, professor of cybersecurity at Limestone. We call him Dr. V. Dr. Brian Amling, provost and professor of computer science at Limestone University. D. Childs, CMMC expert and special assistant to the Clemson CIO, Brian Voss. And John Hoyt, who was a big help in helping to organize this, associate vice president and chief information security officer at Clemson University. And the topic for this panel is, and this is where it really gets down to it, about how do we equip the business community in this state to really be able to have the right kind of cyber workforce training they need to combat cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, you name it. And the title of it is Practical Cybersecurity Workforce Training for South Carolina Businesses. I'd like to just start it off. President Copeland, one of the things that struck me about Limestone, and I heard this from Ken Bible when he was the CISO of DHS, he had not seen any university or college in the country that was really focused on having the curriculum in place to help train the workforce, both online and in person, that Limestone has from a cybersecurity standpoint. And if you could just kind of share with us your vision for Limestone.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we're going to focus on the practical aspect of this because I am no computer scientist at all. But Limestone has, for over 20 years now, had a cybersecurity program. Over 25 years now. Thank you so much. 25 years. And it's one of those areas that it was seen back then as a great opportunity for engagement with students, something that was needed in the market for sure. And as we look at where we're headed now, and as we've already heard, it's a very deep need. So for us, cybersecurity will continue to be a big part of Limestone and where we're headed. Now, we've looked at adding a couple of different things, and one of those, I was waiting for him to say something, but alas, I'll announce it for him. Just last week, we announced that Ken Bible is going to be joining our faculty for cybersecurity. So we're excited to have him there as we continue to build the next generation of leaders in cybersecurity.
Thank you. Dr. V, can you elaborate some on the curriculum that y'all got in place at Limestone that really focuses on cybersecurity that enables folks, not just students, but also, people in the business community who want to go back to school so they can sit for these certifications in the cybersecurity area.
Certainly. Yeah, Dr. V here because my name is Oscar Vasquez Melendez. That's a whole mouthful. So, yeah, we've been in business for 25 years. We started with an associate's degree way back in 2004, based on a request by the FBI saying, hey, education institutions, you need to start doing something and getting people trained, educated. So we started with pretty much a part of our computer science degree, a concentration, and it grew. And right now it's #1, okay? The largest, we turned it to a full bachelor's, 100% online. And today, according to the provost who's sitting right here, we will have a new certification, which was designed precisely to enhance our program, #1, but keep serving the professionals that are serving the cybersecurity community and do not have, the education. We are focused on education, and obviously that will follow with certain certifications, and we will take on the CMMC. Personally, I'm military retired and went pretty much evolved from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We are here and we will be here in the future to keep educating that workforce that it's primarily needed to begin this process and continue to get that education which is part of this process. Again, having all the certifications is good, but the education is also very key and important because these levels need to be managed. And that's what we intend to do. So like our president said, we are here for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. V. And Provost Amling, can you elaborate a little bit on like the curriculum? I saw online where you list curriculum that would enable a student to be able to go and sit for some of these certification exams.
Certainly. So in terms of our curriculum, we have, as Dr. V said, we enable not only the students to get a bachelor's degree from us totally online, which helps us serve the entire state of South Carolina, but at the same time as receiving your undergraduate bachelor's degree, you are gaining knowledge that is going to help you as a student sit for certain certification exams that are specifically cybersecurity focused. And it's kind of piggyback on something Doc V had already said. We have this certificate program that we're introducing to help businesses in South Carolina workforce training. But we can also work with individual entities to say, like, what do you need? What does your business specifically need? And we can tailor a package just for you that's either maybe a course, handful of courses, a certification, or maybe something we maybe haven't thought about yet. So we have the flexibility in order to partner with business entities across the state to assist you in whatever part of the path or the road you are on in the CMMC journey.
Thank you. And Dee, you are a Clemson CMMC expert. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that y'all are doing and the challenges and just really want to get your views?
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm so pleased to be part of this panel and this incredible seminar today. So I was initially hired at Clemson to help them along with their research computing. And along the way, we determined that we really needed to make rapid progress with achieving CUI compliance and now eventually CMMC compliance as well. So we have really had to dig our heels in and use all the resources that are available on our campus, including our Chief Information Security Officer. I personally have about almost 20 years of experience in cybersecurity. So from a practical standpoint, I've used the resources at universities as well as done certifications on my own and kind of educated myself along the way. And so in terms of how that could help industry, as Speaker Bible said in the beginning, cybersecurity is not a once and done process, and neither is CMMC. So I think availing yourselves of the opportunities that we have in our own South Carolina community, both from university resources and the resources that are available in the community, the business community, with CCAs and organizations that can help you get along in your progress towards CMMC. So certainly there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of challenges that we have had to face, but doing so in an informed manner, using the resources that are available within your own organization and resources from the South Carolina community is really important to help you achieve those benchmarks for CMMC.
And John Hoyt, as the CISO for Clemson, man, I've watched you over the years. You've really been engaged working with the business community on behalf of Clemson and engaged. Can you fill us in on some of the things that, as the CISO, that you're involved with?
Yeah, absolutely. Clemson University has a lot of universities. They're like a small city we were talking about earlier. You've got water treatment plant, you've got a police department, you've got a fire department. You never know what's going to happen on a given day, right? And you've got research. And some of that is very, sensitive research, and some of it is DoD related research, depending on, what kind of university you are. So it's the gamut, and you never know exactly what new compliance thing that you're gonna have to be involved with. But what I've seen before coming to Clemson, I worked in corporate, and when Sarbanes-Oxley came on the scene, it was like, okay, now here's all these things that you have to get to know and understand, all these compliance requirements. And the auditor shows up and they say, okay, tell us all the things you're doing, and you may be doing those things. Now tell us where you've got it written down, right? And that's really kind of how I've seen with CMMC. It's now, okay, here's all these new requirements. It's great. You may be doing these things, but where do you have it documented? Where do you have it written down? Where's your evidence, right, to back that up? So I've seen for universities, especially, where we're moving more like corporations, right? We're kind of moving that direction. I don't think we're ever going to be there completely, but it's a culture shift for sure. And we're having to adjust to that with this kind of research that we're doing.
Thank you, John. I'm going to ask the entire panel a couple of questions and just get your thoughts. The first is workforce cybersecurity training. What do you feel are the greatest needs for the South Carolina business community as far as workforce cybersecurity training is concerned?
So for me, I think, and I really believe in apprenticeships and internships. We have a student-operated cybersecurity operations center, and we're building more of those in. I think that is just other businesses need to bake that in and just bring them in early, give them those apprenticeships. Don't expect too much from where they should be, but help train them up. And then now you've got a trained workforce to just jump right in. So that's something I'm a big believer of.
Others? Yep.
I think there are a series of things that industry can do, beginning with some resources that are free and easily available on the internet. And that's probably good news to everybody, is that you can begin your own journey by looking at the National Institute of Standard and Technology's website. You can look at the DoD CIO website, which has resources that are very, very specific to CMMC, but understanding the underlying framework of the NIST 800-171 and 853 frameworks, which are foundational for CMMC. It never hurts to just go out and read as much as you can, do that at night or do that during the day, and make that a part of somebody's job performance. opportunity in their job role, that's a great way to start because it's free and you don't have to pay anyone. However, I'm a huge advocate for the kind of formal education that comes from higher education and having a curriculum that is extremely tailored to what the program is that you're going to have to achieve, which is CMMC compliance. So I would encourage you to seek out universities like this and get that kind of very formal education, and then augment that with certifications within your own organization, because it will only make your organization more secure and better the more that you achieve each level stepping up. So that's my advice.
Obviously, mine is education. Let me tell you a story. Yesterday, I received an email on a request from the Waterworks of Spartanburg, an opening for a remote position, and all required is not a bachelor's but an associate's degree. And the pay scale surprised me. I was tempted to apply. And then really, I mean, I went like, and then you go like, it was a starting position. And so again, education is the base. It's good to have a lot of certifications, but when you're going to apply to these managerial positions from either government or corporate, as a minimum certificate, an associate's degree will get you started. Obviously, again, our program, both of them are 100% online. We have served, we run recently a survey since we began 25 years, okay? And the response was really surprising. A lot of those that completed, like, let's say 15 years ago, they have moved from the lowest scale of, jobs to the managerial executive, either in the corporate sector, in the military, and also, at the top executive levels. So, we have done our job in educating, and that's where we're going to focus, and that's where we will continue to do.
I agree, except for you can't take the job. You have to stay at Limestone. We're happy to have you. Honestly, Van, it's a lot events like this. Certainly appreciate the South Carolina Manufacturing and Cape. Certainly appreciate you all, and love having the engagement with Clemson as well. The Small Business Association, their tagline is "Open for Business." Limestone is open for business, especially in cybersecurity. And when we look at what that engagement looks like, it's more events like this. I would love for the rest of this lecture hall to be filled with students, for us to find opportunities like this on college campuses all over the country, certainly primarily in Gaffney, South Carolina. I would love for that institution to have a lot of these. But for the workforce, to meet college students where they are and to help us as we're developing these students. We can do so much from a classroom, but to have that real life experience of what's actually happening out in the field and bringing that into the classroom makes all the difference.
And it kind of goes back to something, when Mr. Bible was speaking as well, that level one of the CMMC. It's very basic. It's not overly onerous things that really anybody should be doing, whether they have to deal with CMMC or not. It should be things that any business, large, small, whatever sector you're in, should be doing. And that's why we at Limestone want to work with any corporations, manufacturers, whoever they may be in the state of South Carolina and beyond, to provide the training that your own entity needs.
Right. Last quick question for the group. Cybersecurity threats are constantly evolving. And so I would like to get your thoughts. What should we be focused on from a cybersecurity workforce training perspective as these new threats evolve? Any thoughts?
I think it's going to rely on constant training, you know, and we've heard from several speakers already. It's not just a one and done approach. You're always having to reevaluate what you are doing and how you're doing it. I think was at CMMC is at least every 3 years you go through a like a recertification type process, and there's a reason for that. Not only because, you know, technology on itself increases at a rapid pace in relation to other industries. You know, now what's the big push today? AI. Well, what kind of security threats or may come from that? So not only is it's basically staying up to date.
You know, I think that's a great point. And one of the things we have to constantly remind ourselves and constantly be engaged in what the potential threats are. Quick story: we just had a board meeting at Limestone, and we had some faculty who are retiring, and they're going to get faculty emeritus status. And the board said, you know, what does that mean? What does it mean to the institution? What does it cost us, kind of thing? And I said, well, it's a tremendous honor for the faculty. They get to stay engaged. And really, for the most part, what it costs us is they get to keep their email address. You know, we pass on, okay, that's great. I've thought about that a lot since. The potential cost for the university is significant because those faculty members maintain their email address. And as you know, it's a very low threat as far as what we saw today, but there's still a threat there that we now have faculty members, and we have had faculty members for a long time since we've had email, that have had access to the institution's email through email addresses and could forward things on, can click on a link, all those things, whether it be on campus or at their home, that could be a potential threat. So maybe the cost wasn't exactly as low as I pitched to the board, but it's just continuing to re-educate and learn what else is out there.
I will say this: I'm a firm believer of teamwork and partnerships. And I'm going to pass the microphone to the Clemson, because we need to do this together. I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great future. That's where the power becomes, right? Here we go.
That's good.
Go ahead.
Well, I have two things, one of which I didn't invent this phrase, but cybersecurity is a team sport. And so as Mr. Bible said, a lot of the exploits come because we've gotten lazy or we're just not as vigilant as we need to be. And that includes everybody in every organization, and protecting your data as if it was your own data or your child's data, and treating your company's data in the same way. And then specific to CMMC, the one thing I've learned during this process is that if we can reduce the threat service, and that's a fancy way of saying like only, you know, create the data that you need to create and only save the data that you need to create, and protect that data fiercely, because those are the goods that our adversaries would like to have. So, you know, reducing the amount of threat that you have is a good start.
So I think that we have a unique opportunity at universities to prepare students and train them about security awareness before they go into the workforce, right? So get them ready, because they are going to be the ones that are working at the manufacturing facilities that are going to get phished. And I think my pitch is to just include this as part of raising the awareness level of students while we have them and we have that opportunity to train them. You know, phish your students, whatever, train your students to harden them while you have that chance, and give them some of that direct, training, so that when they do leave, now they're maybe more attractive for an organization, excuse me, where they're like, well, okay, you've been through this training, maybe you've got certified in this, and I feel better about hiring you as an employee because you've gotten this training. So I think that's a unique thing that we have a chance to do.
This was a great panel. I want to thank each of you for participating. And I'll say this as a South Carolinian, it's great to see both Clemson University and Limestone University leading the way in academia to help ensure we've got the right kind of cybersecurity workforce here in South Carolina. Thank you. Our next speaker, you heard earlier, former DHS CISO talk about some of the universities, and I didn't realize what had happened at Georgia Tech with the False Claims Act and things like that. So the universities have some challenges, and they as was mentioned earlier, when it comes to CMMC compliance, they have to be CMMC compliant too to do business with the Department of Defense. Our next speaker is Brian Voss, the Chief Information Officer for Clemson University, and he will speak on the impact of CMMC and cybersecurity challenges on industry and academia. Brian?
One of the advantages of being able to follow some really good people is I've expanded what I want to talk about. So before I get into the presentation slides, Ben, where I make my points powerfully, I want to follow up on some things that have been said already today by others. And, you know, I did a board briefing last month, and sort of my idea going in was, first off, I wanted to scare the hell out of them, right, with what's going on. And this gets into, you know, things that Terrence and Ken said earlier. The cyber threat environment landscape that we're facing now is drastically increasing week by week. In fact, when John and I were assessing things last spring, and then we talked about it again in August, it was amazing how much more threatening things have gotten. So just as quick background, you know, a couple of things. If you've got HBO Max or Max, there's a really interesting documentary out there called The Perfect Weapon, and it talks about the main players, the people who are actually trying to get at us and why. And so I urge you to, you know, if you got it, go look at it. There's a number of those, but I think that one is really good for succinctly putting it into perspective about what we're facing. The second thing is if you Google an article titled "Everything is Broken" by a journalist hacker named Quinn Norton. Now, she actually wrote this a decade ago. All right. So, but it's still true today. And her premise is that everything in our IT world has been brought on so fast. And it was brought out sort of like a ship being put to sea before all the bottom panels were put in place. Right. So it's broken. And, you know, we all get these notifications, you know, Firefox needs to update. Microsoft has a new release, new operating system. And that's not because they put a load of new features in. That's because they're fixing things that are broken. So you have this environment, which is kind of cobbled together and broken. And on top of it, you have this increasing threat from these cyber actors. You know, one of the concepts I've been putting across at Clemson is tech debt. For years, IT was sort of viewed as a nice to have, hey, we'll do this if we can. But we have not been investing in our IT infrastructure, including cybersecurity, but in basic infrastructure. And this has led to tech debt, which is we're now going to have to pay off that debt to get ourselves in a position to deal with these new sorts of things that are coming through. So if you're thinking, oh, we're just going to get going on the CMC and put pieces in place, you're going to find you have a lot of tech debt. The other point that I'll get is IT subservience. In big organizations that aren't really focused on IT as their deliverable, like a university, IT is sort of down in the structure, viewed as, okay, yeah, take care of it. And over the decades, there's been this culture that has developed on IT subservience, meaning you do what we say and then don't say anything. And the Georgia Tech example that was given earlier is a classic example of this, because the researchers were running a lab. They needed to get their work done. They needed to get their invoices in, but they hadn't done the things that they were supposed to do in their lab. This is what was alleged in the suit. And the IT people were told, ixnay, you know, just say it's done, sign here. Those are the ones that filed the whistleblower suit. So I think as we're looking at our structures and our environments, we've got to deal with this concept of frugality. We haven't been investing in IT, and we have to understand the role IT plays as essentially the ninjas that are watching us while we sleep. So you want to make sure that you put a lot of trust, responsibility, and authority in not only your CIOs, but especially your CISOs. I am very lucky those two people that were on the panel work for me That's why I am able to sleep better at night. All right, Ben, why don't you fire up and let me get into CMMC. So where's this, the clicker? Perfect. So I don't really need to define this. This has already been defined really well by my predecessors. Again, this is part of what we were trying to talk to the board about. Essentially, though, it's not just, as John said, having it. It's being able to document that you have it. And it's not being able to every year sort of update your documentation that's showing it. It's like every month, every quarter, or whenever the funding agency says, hey, I want to see what you're doing on this. So this is an ongoing thing. You know, it was emphasized at the 110 points with the 320 elements to it. You know, if you have one of those 110 that's got 4 of those sub elements and you pass 3, you don't pass. So you have to pay attention to everything. The rule went into effect in October as far as when it was published. It's going to be effective in December, as been pointed out. So from a Clemson standpoint, though, we're trying to get ready for this. And John said something that I've used as a soundbite, which is, if you're going to do DoD research, you better be like a DoD contractor. So if you're not doing this today, you need to get to be at the same level as people who are. The other analogy that I've used to try and make this understood in my environment is, you know, you can't have someone move into a house that you have for sale if you don't yet have a house. If you've got a foundation and stick and maybe one room, that's not enough to sell the DoD to start moving their furniture in. So you have to be completely ready to do this. The other point that I think is relevant too is the previous speakers were talking about how, you know, this is going to expand. It's going to expand beyond DoD. Other federal agencies, you know, National Institutes of Health, people who are dealing with student data, all kinds of data are going to be having to look at their controls. And government entities and agencies being somewhat lazy, they're not going to reinvent the wheel. They're going to say, we're just going to use the same thing. So get ready. If it's not just DoD, it could be other forms of corporate or government research that you're doing. So, all right, Clemson. Clemson is a big, large research enterprise. And we have had a very large research computing enterprise supporting research for a long time. Clemson is probably in the top 5 or 6 universities in the country in terms of the amount of high performance computing research and data structures that we have available. And it's not because we're doing this for a lab like a national center. This is what we make available to our community in a shared resource. All right. Shared resource. Our concept has always been, we build this big cluster and y'all come. You know, people who have particular work that they're doing that help fund it, they get the node, but that node then is available to other people. You know, CMMC, CUI kind of data isn't going to allow that anymore. It's the secure enclaves that you mentioned. All right. So we've had to first, I think you had it would take 12 to 18 months. Bingo. We have spent $1.5 million or so in the last year and a half to get ready. As Bob Knight used to say, getting in position to get into position. We're going to spend another $1.7 million in the rest of this fiscal year to get all the tools that we've learned that we're going to need to have and the people, right? Everyone's thinking I'm buying machines for an enclave, I'm buying software to put on. The biggest thing that we have to think about is the humanware, because the humanware is what makes that stuff work, runs that documentation, makes sure that those standards are met. All right. And we're going to probably be spending $2.5 to $3 million every year to keep this going. So this is a new sort of thing that's coming in. And again, I note, look at that, 70% is going to be staff. So it's not just go to the store and buy stuff. It's hiring people that are going to have to be trained and stay knowledgeable. We're believing that we've got to be ready for having our granting agencies looking for that score. All right. So we're doing self-assessment. We've done a self-assessment already. We're going to be refreshing that, but this is what we're thinking at Clemson. We also believe there's the Clemson New Strategic Plan, Clemson Elevate, and the second pillar is ascending in research. Well, that ascension is going to come not from traditional sources like National Science Foundation or DOE. It's going to come from DoD, corporate, and other sorts of things. So we've got to be ready to do this. And I think I kept my slides simple. Van. So thanks.
Thanks, Brian. That's great. And it sounds to me like Clemson might need to get on I-85 and go up to Georgia Tech and help those folks to be able to comply. So thanks for your leadership and what you're doing. You're in for a real treat with our next speaker. I got to know General Owens a number of years ago, many years ago when he was a colonel. And I was surprised that and he was working then with others, helping the Army to stand up the Army Cyber Command. But I was impressed with him, how much he loved South Carolina. He wanted to work with the business community. He wanted to work with academia to get things done. He recently retired as a major general with the South Carolina National Guard, and the Guard had the good sense to bring him back as a civilian the next day. And there's no one in South Carolina state government that understands the totality of the resources the state has from a cybersecurity perspective. Great insight. And so our next speaker will be Major General retired Brad Owens with the South Carolina National Guard, who will speak on South Carolina cybersecurity resources. General Owens.
Gentlemen, welcome. Today's seminar addresses a topic critical to our national security and to the operational resilience of our defense supply chain. Collectively, we can strengthen our security and ultimately the security of our nation. I'm Major General Brad Owens. I'm a retired Assistant Adjutant General for the South Carolina National Guard. And I'm going to just quickly run through kind of the focus that the Guard is looking at when it comes to cybersecurity and what we've done over the years and kind of the direction that we're heading with some of our partners. We titled this presentation, The Power of Partnerships, and we'll talk a little bit about leveraging proximity when it comes to our partners that are in close geographic proximity to the National Guard, but really everyone in South Carolina is in close proximity because we're a network force throughout the state. And I'm going to share some information about the Guard and what we've done as I quickly go through this. There is a QR code at the end of the briefing, and I welcome you to utilize that code. And if there's additional questions at the end, please contact me. Again, Major General retired Brad Owens with the Adjutant General's Office, South Carolina National Guard. Some of our partners that we are intimately involved with, USC Aiken, Clemson, Savannah River Site, Savannah River National Laboratory, and the Naval Information Warfare Center, which is down in Charleston. This is the agenda that I'll run through, and it's basically who the Guard is, how we can leverage and collaborate throughout the state. Our strategic leaders recognize a sense of urgency. There are national security threats, and these are complex problems that need a complex enterprise. And the rapid pace of technology changes requires us to work together throughout the state, and in working and utilizing the South Carolina National Guard as an enabling force, we can strengthen our workforce and provide economic development throughout the state of South Carolina. You know, our beautiful state, 5.2 million, our state flag we're very proud of. This is our armories that are located throughout the state. We're in just about every county. We have 9,300 members. We're a very diverse force, and you'll see that in this next slide. We have the only Army Air Missile Defense Command, the theater level. That's the 263rd there in the middle, with the fourth largest aviation, National Guard aviation state with, I forget how many airframes we have, Engineer Brigade, Signal Brigade, Field Artillery Brigade, the Maneuver Enhanced Brigade down in Charleston, Medical Command, transportation companies. So very diverse. But what we're here to talk about today is our cyber battalion. We basically canvassed the force in 2014. We came up with about 100 soldiers that had cybersecurity backgrounds, primarily from their civilian acquired skill sets. And in 2017, we got the force structure allocation for a cyber battalion. After proving ourselves across the nation in some cyber exercises. And in 2018, that battalion actually deployed to Fort Meade, Maryland to work with Cybercom for a year. And they just recently came off in their second deployment at Fort Meade, Maryland, Cybercom, and also our cyber at Fort Eisenhower. The battalion is made up of an offensive company, a defensive company, and a headquarters company. So how can we leverage some of these capabilities? What we did was back in, about 10 years ago, we recognized that Fort Eisenhower was going to play a big role with our cyber and NSA Georgia. We looked at the University of South Carolina in Aiken, because one of our models is to construct new facilities on small college campuses so that we can have access to academia, workforce development, and, you know, as the seventh, I believe, seventh largest employer in the state of South Carolina, you know, we have the same workforce development challenges as everybody else. And then further down in the bottom right hand is the icon there that represents the Savannah River site, our partnership with the Department of Energy. That federal property is of importance to us as well, and the relationship we have with the Savannah River National Laboratory. Well, let's look at the University of South Carolina, Aiken. You can see how close of proximity we are, and you can see where the National Cyber Range Complex with NIWIC is located there in Charleston. So first, we've got a $44.8 million build out at the University of South Carolina, Aiken. This is the largest capital investment that the National Guard has put forth in one location that I'm aware of. And I was, you know, I've been with the National Guard now for about 42 years. So we'll talk about the power of proximity. Our partners are within close proximity, 20 miles from one another. And we see the central Savannah River area is vitally important. And our relationship with the cyber battalion in close proximity to Fort Eisenhower is important, as well as the non-kinetic effects that we need to train on is of interest to us on the DOE federal properties. So we think by working together and being on campus there, that we can provide academia, workforce development, collaboration, and then next door to the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative with the Savannah River National Laboratory, we can also introduce the prototyping and work very closely with private industry in the multi-purpose rooms. That's Dr. Sandra Jordan. Give her all the credit with University of South Carolina, Aiken, and our Adjutant General Van McCarty. So as we build out, let me scroll down through here. You can see where the University of South Carolina, Aiken campus is. And the first item of interest is the Ruth Patrick Center. Notice the number of visitors that come through Ruth Patrick every year. We believe if you're going to have a cybersecurity background, you need to start early. And the governor's Cyber Patriot Boot Camp and the things that they do at the Ruth Patrick Science Education Center on campus is of vital interest to us. The University of South Carolina, Aiken National Guard Cyber Integration Center will be built right there on the softball field, item number 2. And it'll provide us a $13 million, 26,000 square foot cyber center that has event space, has project rooms. It'll have classrooms for the students, and it'll allow our cyber soldiers to work closely with the project there with academia and whatnot. Item number 3 is here. This is a $29 million, about a 9,000 square foot Aiken Readiness Center. This facility will go under construction in about a month, we suspect. Now, the Cyber Integration Center will be constructed in about a year from now. So we're currently under design with it. Both facilities will house our cyber battalion and other signal assets, primarily what they call a 10E company, which is an IT infrastructure company. We believe between the Cyber Integration Center, this Readiness Center, and the stationing of those soldiers on campus in close proximity to Fort Eisenhower, we can be a portal into the cyber ecosystem in South Carolina. This is the $65 million, 65,000 square foot advanced manufacturing collaborative being constructed by the Department of Energy and the Savannah River National Laboratory. And we're very interested in the work that they'll be doing in advanced manufacturing and the cyber integration into that advanced manufacturing. So we're very, very excited about them, and that facility will come online about midsummer, I believe, last time I talked with the National Guard, with the National Laboratory. So next is a long history of our relationship with the Savannah River site. I won't go into it, but Savannah River site is 198,000 acres, only 19% of it's developed. As you know, we made weapons grade plutonium and tritium at the site. All the reactors are currently cold, dark, and damp. But we think that there is value in a non-exclusive license at the Savannah River site for the establishment of National Guard training and other military activities, because we need to layer advanced technologies with our training so that we can get exposed to what a digitized battlefield looks like, and again, the non-kinetic effects. So looking at cyber, electromagnetic spectrum operations, electronic signal intelligence, so on and so forth. So we created the 88,000 acres for military activity on site in training areas A, B, C, D, E. We do not affect the core mission of the site. And we're working very closely with Department of Energy and the Savannah River National, the Savannah River National Laboratory. National Guard is the military liaison. You can see those two small areas there in purple off of Highway 125 in B area and down at a place called Gunsight 51. That is exclusive use for National Guard for us to one day build a cantonment area and work again, hopefully codify kind of the relationship we have with the Savannah River National Laboratory. You can see us doing experimentation and also working there on site. We did a lot of work with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DoD, R&D Enterprise, DevCom, GVSC has done work out here, and the Guard can provide ancillary support to that, those advanced technological demonstrations. This is a video here you can click on and watch kind of what we're after in the proving ground. And some of the technologies that we're very interested in that the National Laboratory and the Navy Information Warfare Center has experience in that we need to expose our soldiers to. So SBORNI, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and the weapons of mass destruction, the ICS and cyber can be trained there at the Advanced Technological Proving Ground there at the center of the site. We are partnered with the National Laboratory with SC Nexus and the Energy Security and Green Energy Initiative that Economic Development Agency and the Governor's Office with grid enabling cyber operations. And we're excited about the Gecko project. EW, electronic warfare, radio frequencies, underground facilities, position navigation and timing issues with a denied environment, and the ISR and all the sensors and networks that we're seeing. And of course, drone, counter drone. I think they're launching about 10,000 drones a month in Ukraine. So we've got to get exposed to drone, counter drone operations. I won't go into it, but these are some of the exercises that we've done with the Navy Information Warfare Center. We've got another exercise coming up this spring that we're very excited with. And again, our Apaches providing ancillary support to their test and evaluations of their autonomous drones at sea. Pretty exciting stuff. We've also got some workforce development initiatives. We're very excited about what we're doing with Clemson University, primarily with Dr. Jonelle Brooks in her research in support of the DoD R&D support. And so we provide ancillary support to the DoD R&D done by Clemson while we're in a training status. And you can see some of the things that we worked on with Dr. Brooks. And all this builds out to kind of a regional range complex. You can see the connectivity between Fort Eisenhower, USC Aiken, and our Cyber Integration Center, our connectivity with NIWIC, and even down towards Camp Shelby in Mississippi, Muscatatuck up in Indiana, and Camp Blanding down in Florida, and then all the way out to Fort Huachuca and the Pelias Training Center. So we can basically get a multi-domain operation at scale that we would see in a near-peer fight. So let me scroll on down. I'll finish up here. And this is pretty much what it looks like, an integrated federal regional range capability. So we can do live, virtual, and simulated training with our partners in other states and territories. We believe South Carolina can be a leader in this domain. And we certainly have the talent. We just need to stay after it and work through some of these issues, long-term goals. So I've talked to you today about the power of partnerships, the power of proximity. We've got some great partners in South Carolina. We want to leverage them not only to prepare our soldiers for the next fight, but also to bring economic development to the state of South Carolina, bring value to the state of South Carolina. And we look forward to collaborating with others that have similar goals. We're excited about the non-kinetic effects that we can introduce at Savannah River site and the power of partnerships and partnering with academia and industry. So I know that was a short kind of hit the wave tops, but I'm excited to enjoy the conference with you, and I look forward to maybe us connecting at a future event in person. So thank you very much.
Welcome back. Our next speaker is Caitlin Scroggins, who is the program coordinator for the South Carolina Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity Program, which is run by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division that we all know as SLED. We're happy to have her today, and her talk is focused on the role of South Carolina law enforcement in cybersecurity. Katie Scroggins.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Van, for inviting us out to come speak. I know we love having the opportunity to share about what we're doing in the state of South Carolina when it comes to cybersecurity. John, I don't think I'm able to change. Oh, there we go. But just a little bit about who we are and what we do. So SCKIC, or the South Carolina Critical Infrastructure and Cybersecurity Program, is a SLED sponsor initiative and whose overall goal is to help secure the critical infrastructure sectors of South Carolina, with critical manufacturing being one of those. And the way we accomplish this is through providing security services to any private and public organization that are classified as critical infrastructure. And based on how our program is funded, these services come at no cost to our participants. We also facilitate something called the Cyber Liaison Officer, or CLO program. CLOs are generally your IT professionals or information security professionals or even administrative staff who are responsible for the information security posture of your organization. And what we do with this program is we host monthly meetings, both formal and informal, along with training, webinars, and in-person events to help improve the overall security posture of South Carolina, but also give these professionals a platform to build relationships and to network. I know something that we're always saying when we speak to our CLOs is that our greatest resource when it comes to cybersecurity is each other. And so to have that platform to build those relationships, to share information, not only from us to our participants, but vice versa, is critical in securing not only your organization, but also the state. We also lead something called the SC-KIC Task Force, which is comprised of both federal and state partners, which we'll cover a little bit more here in a second. And then, as I mentioned, our overall goal is to improve the cyber posture of South Carolina. So with that, what we'll do is just to give you a better idea of how our program is organized by critical infrastructure sectors. As you can see, this is from our 2023 end of year report. I do always like to mention with government facilities, there is such a large difference in the percentage numbers, but that's mainly because government facilities not only cover your city, county, state government, it also includes education, which is K through 12, and then higher education, along with elections and other government supported entities. So while there is a huge discrepancy, I always like to make note of that. But as you can see, some of our largest participants include emergency services, so emergency management, law enforcement, and police, and then also healthcare, public health, and energy. So as I mentioned, SC-KIC leads the SC-KIC task force. So SLED, of course, oversees both our program and the task force. And within the task force, it also includes our computer crimes and homeland security and fusion center entities. But this is our SC-KIC task force. And as you take a look at our partners, it's important to note that we are actually run on a task force model. In the occasion of a cyber incident, the last thing you want to do is to have to call, 50 different numbers to report a cyber incident. With our task force model, you can call us and we will handle the notification and coordination efforts when it comes to incident response. So in the occasion you have an incident and you need additional resources, we have the ability to coordinate those meetings and coordinate the resources from both our state and federal partners. One partnership I do just want to mention is with the South Carolina National Guard. As Major General Owens mentioned, South Carolina is home to 125th Cyber Protection Battalion. In the occasion of a cyber incident, we have the ability to request that Governor McMaster activate that unit to assist, whether it's hands on the keyboard or guidance in the case of an incident. So that's just one partnership I'd like to mention. And we're constantly fostering that relationship by training with the National Guard individuals and also just improving that information sharing. But this is our task force. And then, as I mentioned, another initiative of SC-KIC is that we provide security services to critical infrastructure entities. And as I mentioned, based on our funding, there is no cost. So as my coworker likes to say, it's free 99. But these are our services that we provide to our participants. I'll just highlight a couple. But the first is cyber threat intelligence. SC-KIC actually employs a full-time cyber threat intelligence analyst who monitors things like the dark, deep, and open webs for account compromises, credentials being sold, if there's any kind of information being posted by threat actors due to exfiltration. He has the abilities to collect that information and to disseminate that to the organizations as necessary. As I also mentioned, incident response is another thing that another service that it can be utilized by our participants. It can be anything from just asking, hey, we had this happen. How do you advise we or what should our next steps be? So providing guidance to being on site and providing assistance to responding to the incident. Another of our services I just want to quickly mention is our readiness exercises platform. This is our newest service. I think we've had it for about a year now. And what it is as a result of many of our participants and other people we engage with in our day-to-day work, requested that we run tabletop exercises. And what readiness exercises is it's actually a platform that we utilize to run exercises that are based on different scenarios. So it can be everything from developing an incident response plan to actually having Atomic Red Team in scenarios where organizations can actually put their knowledge and their skills to test to see how they would respond to different kinds of scenarios like ransomware or malware. So that is our newest service, but we also offer phishing and cybersecurity awareness training, external vulnerability scanning, and Active Directory security assessments. But that's just a little bit about our services we provide to our program participants. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of transition into talking about cybersecurity in South Carolina. I know we all see the different threats and the different incidents that take place across the country. And so these are some of the common cyber threats we see here at SCKIC and also on a state and national level. But of course, phishing, it's always something that comes up and we talk about at length with our participants, because phishing, it's very adaptable and it's extremely effective. It's such an easy way for threat actors to gain access to organizations' infrastructure. But also DOS and DDoS attacks, so denial of service and distributed denial of service attacks are another way of another threat that we're seeing take place across the state. Malware, ransomware, which is a form of malware. Of course, with ransomware, there's not only ransomware, there's double extortion, triple extortion tactics, which include the not only exfiltrating data before the network is encrypted and demanding payment for the decryption key for the network, but also the demanding a ransom for the exfiltrated data to not be sold on the dark web. And then triple extortion is including when threat actors will actually take the information from the data exfiltrated and target the victims at a later time. Business email compromise is another prominent type of cyber threat we're seeing across the state, especially when it comes to the transfer of financial accounts, the email saying, hey, we have a new financial institution or new account. Here's our information. Please send the payments to that. Of course, exploited vulnerabilities. It's something we see every day. Patching. I know our participants get tired of us saying this, but patch. Knowing what exploited vulnerabilities are out there is also a critical part. And it's something we are extremely careful to share and very intentional with sharing the most critical of vulnerabilities in our monthly calls we have with our CLOs. To give you a better idea of the different types of threats that SCKIC saw or responded to or were aware of in 2023, this is actually from our 2023 end of year report. As you can see, account compromise was the most common type of threat that we responded to last year, followed by malware and ransomware. And what's interesting is in the 2024 numbers that I've calculated up until October, that number is almost at 50%. So it just shows how critical it is to implement different security measures like multi-factor authentication, or more specifically, phish-resistant MFA, ensuring that you follow the principle of least privilege, and ensuring that users only have the necessary access to be successful within their role. But this just kind of shows the different threats that we were responding to or were aware of. And I'm extremely interested to see what these numbers look like once the year wraps up here in the next month. So just a quick takeaway to talk about what you can do. As always, as we've talked about at length throughout this event, is security is a continuous life cycle. It's not a one and done thing. The threats we see today are not the threats we saw yesterday, 5 years ago, and it's not the threats we'll see tomorrow, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So having that proactive mindset of understanding that things are changing very quickly, and we have to remain agile and adaptable as those new threats come to fruition. Know that good security posture within an organization begins with the basic. I know a big thing that we've talked about here at SC Kick with our participants is MFA, conditional access. Knowing what tools are absolutely necessary for your organization to be secure is critical. And as always, you can reach out to us for guidance or if you have any questions about that. The next one is help promote a culture of cybersecurity within your organization. Something we talk about a lot when we go out and present and talk about cybersecurity, what you can do, or if we're leading cybersecurity awareness training, is that many of our users need to recognize that cybersecurity is not just a work thing. It's also it's something that we see in our personal lives, professional, and it's always evolving. And so creating that culture of cybersecurity is critical for your users to recognize that it's not just something that we see in our 9 to 5s. It's something we see outside of work. And it's something that we always need to be cognizant of. And then the last one is utilize the available resources to help strengthen your organization, like joining SC Kick. Knowing what resources are available to you is a critical component of securing your organization. As I mentioned, our greatest resource is each other. So if you do ever need cybersecurity resources or guidance, please know that you can always reach out to us at this email. This actually goes to our entire team. We want to be a resource to you. So if you have any questions, need guidance on where to start with securing organizations or how to evolve your security program within your organization, we want to be a resource to you. But with that is our email. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you do have any questions. But Van, thank you for having us. I know it's always a great pleasure to share about what we're doing and help secure the state of South Carolina.
Katie, we appreciate it. And thank you too for what you do with South Carolina Kick and at SLED. Thanks again.
Yeah.
If the panelists for the next panel will come on down, and this is going to be our wrap-up panel, what you can do to ensure CMMC compliance and improve cyber defenses. Our panelists will feature John Hoyt, you heard him earlier, Associate Vice President and CISO at Clemson University, Terry McGraw, who is the CEO of Cape Endeavors, strong military and national security agency background in cybersecurity, and Dr. Oscar Vasquez Melendez, Dr. V, Professor of Cybersecurity at Clemson University. And for the folks watching online, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat and we will ask these the experts. I'm going to begin though by asking each one that basic question that this wrap-up panel is all about. What you can do to ensure CMMC compliance and improve cyber defenses. John, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to it. There's a lot of controls that we've talked about, and there's a lot of work that you have to put into it. It's not something to put off until later. That's number one, right? If you're thinking about it, you're probably behind. Especially other universities that we interact with. There are different stages of maturity throughout their process, and you definitely got to get it going, get the right resources, bringing in experts to help you assess where you are. For what we did, we had a vendor come in, help us do a gap assessment, where we were, where we needed to be based off of what we're doing, and that really helped us jumpstart our next steps to focus really to get to the level we want to be. So that'd be first thing is don't wait, right? Jump on it right away if you're not already, and get help if needed.
I am an educator before a technologist. So I emphasize again, education, education, education. That is the basis. It's good to have many certifications, but the education is the foundation. So at Limestone University, we've been doing this for 25 years, as I said before, and we will continue. We're going to grow. And so you are welcome. Our www.limestone.edu website and you can contact me there. And so we also going to be, or we are already planning to have some summer conferences as well for businesses, and you know, do a creative program where all this will be just one place, take all.
I would two things. Number one, please do not underestimate the level of detail and depth that the CMMC compliance program will request for verification of your assessment. Even when you're self-assessing, you have to actually look at the subcomponents, as Andy had said earlier, going from the ground up to understand where you really are. The second point to that is don't be afraid to get help, but vet the help that you get. Right now, we're seeing a lot of market texture and people grossly misrepresenting their skills in this segment. Not only the products they're saying that are, you know, can help you with CMMC compliance, the knowledge bases they provide. We've had to come in, you know, behind other vendors to help clean up the gross misrepresentation, the mess that they made in people's environment. So vet your partners in this very well. Ask critical questions. Ask how many they've successfully brought through the program. Ask what the typical scores are for their customers, you know, going for assessment, et cetera, et cetera. You really do need to make sure you're partnering with people who can help you, so you're not throwing good money after bad. It's already hard enough to get assessed, and then if you're wasting money on a vendor partner who really doesn't actually further your efforts to getting compliant, you're just wasting good money. I'm adding Andy to the panel.
Yeah. It's continuing on that market of lemons phenomenon that Terry mentioned earlier. I mean, this is a real thing. When a couple of years ago, when we migrated to the cloud, right, everybody started using Office 365 instead of having an Exchange server somewhere. We started outsourcing IT to managed service providers. What you were doing is you're outsourcing your IT sophistication. The average small business now cannot read those controls and know what they mean. So that's what the Register Provider Organization, the RPO, the CMC made an ability for you to get around this by creating the RPO. This is the only role in the entire CMC ecosystem that's on your side. They are there to defend you, to help you get through it. As Terry was saying, vet them, right? There are bad RPO actors out there. We have to make certain that you get a good one. But once you have that person is on your side. They are there to help you get through the assessment. The assessor's not on your side. Procurement officer's not on your side, right? It's only that role. So make certain you leverage that resource that's been made available to one, understand, can I even use this product? Does that product do what it's telling me it's going to do? Or am I just going to end up, another story on Reddit about how I thought I had 110 and got a negative 120 score during my DibCAC? You don't want to be those guys, right? Because when that assessment happens, it's going to go in EMAS. It's going to go on your permanent record with the DoD procurement officer. So you want to make certain to limit that exposure as much as possible. And there are resources out there. Having those calls, doing the quick look at by an expert is only going to make certain that you haven't overlooked something.
Terry is smart. He brought his subject matter expert with him.
I did.
He sure did. Questions are starting to come in online again. Just submit them to the chat. But what I'm going to do now is throw out a question. Whoever feels most comfortable with it, chime in. Want to hear your thoughts. First question is, how do we need to think about cryptographic requirements for printing CUI?
Yeah, and I believe I saw in the chat where Mr. Bible had put a lot about this one as well. One thing is when it comes to printing, there is a requirement that says all cryptographic modules have to be FIPS validated. If you're printing CUI, that means the memory inside of your printer has to be a FIPS validated module. I can't say how many times you'll go in there and even turning on FIPS mode, if you ask the manufacturer, like, well, there's this FIPS hard drive you had to swap out inside of that printer. Now, all of your printed CUI stuff's failing the cryptographic module piece. So FIPS validated printers, ask the manufacturer, whoever's provided, especially if it's leased gear, to confirm to you that you have it turned on, because for whatever reason, printers will have FIPS mode and you click the button and it doesn't mean FIPS mode. So go to a little bit extra, make certain that you have that in place. That's the one that I keep saying.
Also, if you're printing CUI, right? So these are one of those things where even a secure enclave, you're extending the control base. So you make sure that once it's printed, you still have to maintain a register of that CUI, who's got it out, where is it kept? And then, so the physical security requirements are now going to be inherited. You're going to have to meet those controls. So it's not just the FIPS requirements on the printer, but it then extends to the actual printed material. And a lot of folks are not taking that as seriously as they need to with the control register and tracking of the CUI once it's printed.
Any other thoughts? Good. All right. Next question. How do we know which level we fall under? Who wants to take that?
So the levels are actually pretty simple. If you have CUI, you're level 2. If you don't have CUI, you're a level 1. Every DoD contract, if you have a DFARS contract, you're level 1 no matter what. You have a contract, that's federal contract information, that's level 1. Level 2 is marked CUI. So you get a document, the purple cover page, you got the controlled at the top, or CUI, or a CUI // SP, something like that. That's all CUI. If you have a document that says that, you're a level 2 contractor. Whether or not you'll require an assessment immediately out the gate, or can self-attest for a year, that depends on the type of CUI it is. The DoD recognizes not all CUIs created the same. They use the example of both the design for Marines shoelace and the heads-up display on a fighter pilot, right, are both CUI. However, clearly one of those is more sensitive than the other. So, right, the heads-up display will require an assessment, whereas the manufacturer of the bootlaces may not, right? So but they did not well define it. It is going to be up to the procurement officers on a contract by contract basis. Like, do I want to have this in my phase 1 or not? So you have to be ready, because if you're in that gray area, we feel this is something that would be sensitive, you very well may end up having it. You're not going to know until that contract's published.
Any other thoughts?
You may be a flow down from a prime contractor, right? You cannot always, you need to understand what the prime contractor's handling requirements are and whether or not it extends to you based on what you provide to the prime contractor. So don't underestimate that. You may not think you have a CUI compliance challenge until you understand where you fit in the prime sub flow down.
Yeah,
That's a good thought.
There is a great piece. So I know nobody ever wants to go to the federal registrar, but when it comes to that flow down requirement piece in the new rule, there is a table that shows how your flow down will come, and whether or not, even as a flow down, you will have to be certified you'll have to have an assessment and certification or not. So if you're in, that may be a thing. It's worth looking it up in the federal register, see that chart, just to read it for yourself.
Here's a good question just came in. How do we determine if we can self-assess or need to hire an assessor?
So that's that concept, right? Am I self-assessing? That's going to be the DoD is going to tell you on this contract, is this a phase 1 where we're going to allow you to self-assess or not? And it's going to be where you are in the criticality. There's not enough assessors to assess all 75,000 companies need to be assessed out the gate. So they have to allow this moving goalpost. We're going to allow some people in year 1 to get through. Then year 2, we'll continue to allow people, but fewer people we're going to allow. So, the first, I think they want there to be 1,000 assessments, like 1,300 or something is the goal in the first year to come through, and then to expand that over that 4-year time frame to get to all 75,000. So it's really, you have to kind of look internally. If I have CUI, do I really think in the grand scheme of things this is up there on the criticality, or is it on the lower end? You can kind of help determine that risk for yourself, but it is just a risk that you're carrying like any other risk. You very well may be required to get assessed, and if you're not ready, that's going to be a problem.
Other thoughts? Anything else? Okay. Now, here's a very timely question that just came in. When will I be required to be compliant?
14 years ago, when the DFARS rules were first written, every contract that you have today says that you're doing these things. All they're doing now is asking you to prove it. You've been turning in scores. You've been signing contracts that have this for a very long time already. In fact, you do not have a DoD contract that does not have this 801.71 requirements in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good point. Is that the sad fact is these are things that were table stakes and are table stakes for protecting of your corporate entity, period. But now we are going to a level of inspection that hasn't been required before. And so that, again, as Andy says, these are not new things. These are best practices. The flip side of that argument is that the government doesn't care about your business. They care about their data. They don't care if the control of their data breaks your business processes. right? I mean, because it's the data that they want to hold sensitive, for espionage purposes. We don't want it to be disclosed. But that means that the handling procedures that you have for that CUI may actually impose operational restrictions on your business. You have to determine what the course of action is that has the least impact to your operations and protecting of the data, which is why Andy was talking about the 3 ways to approach this. Do I do a secure enclave? Do I bring up my entirety of my network? How do I configure in that environment to provide the least amount of impact to my business while protecting the government data? Because again, the government's perspective is, I don't care what you do as long as you protect my data. And so you as a commercial entity have to figure out what that looks like, as far as margin and overall operational costs. Some folks will have to make the determination, do I stay in this business? Meaning, do I do government work? If the level of a barrier to entry to do this well and to get your certifications and assessments correct, if that is too high, and this doesn't represent enough of your business, you may be forced to do a cost benefit analysis whether or not you continue. Others will continue on because it does represent enough revenue to make the offset work. Last piece on that, the government does allow for this to be included in your bids as what was the term that they use for recompensation of the allowable cost, meaning what you're doing to prepare for that assessment can be then passed into the bid. The problem is, I don't know. You don't have any idea how many other people are doing that, where you're going to come out on the cost and to the government, et cetera, and the price of your contracts. So I just say that this is not only a contractual problem, it's also a business problem, and you have to look at it holistically.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that is just that especially if you're looking to do research for this, there are these research contracts, research agreements. And one thing is you can't determine what is CUI, right? That the DoD is telling you that this is CUI. You can't go and say, I think this is CUI, or I think this is CUI, right? So that's one thing to note, that, just to clarify, but also that in these contracts, this is where these come in, that, the research office or research offices are involved with this to work through the contract to understand what the requirements are. So just like you said, there shouldn't be any misconception of what you need to do, but now it's becoming the actual enforcement of those requirements that you're going to have to make sure you're doing. So we've known about it for a long time. It's just been more and more like, okay, this is coming, and now it's really coming. It's really here. So I think a lot of organizations that aren't sure, especially if you're doing research, go review your contracts. It should be pretty clear.
Right. Here's another question. Is all CUI considered the same, or are there types that are most important?
Sure. So, no, not all CUI is the same. You have basic and specified. There are 2 levels of it. Within specified, there's a bunch of different categories of it, and each have their own handling requirements. The really big one when it comes to this is export controlled, things like ITAR or any of the EAR stamp stuff. If you have ITAR data, you cannot export that outside the United States unless you have an ITAR license giving you the ability to do so. So if you're on, say, the Microsoft commercial cloud for your email and you have ITAR data in there, Microsoft uses a follow the sun model. They don't keep the data in the United States at all times. It's part of their general maintenance. It's going to be accessed from around the world. And that is an export violation. Microsoft tells you you can't use this cloud to hold export controlled data. So if you put it there, Microsoft exports it, you just created an export violation without doing anything. You didn't even realize you did it. They say, that's why we created the government high cloud for you to be in to hold this ITAR. You should have been in that cloud. It's the only way we're going to hold it. Okay, so that's probably the biggest one to make sure you're cognizant of when we're advising customers. It's, do you have ITAR export control data? If yes, 100% you have to be in GCI. If not, when it comes to just regular CUI, if you go to the Microsoft, there's a great TechNet blog on it. The regular commercial environment is not capable. It's capable of meeting 80171, but not of CMMC. So if you have CUI, you have to be in the GCC cloud. So if you're in the commercial cloud today, you either have to build an enclave or you have to migrate into one of the compliant clouds for those Microsoft clouds.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Another question just came in. Thanks to all of you for your time today and for providing cross-sector knowledge. My question is, how can we find CUI that may be saved throughout our network?
So that's a great question, and one that of course we didn't tackle till recently ourselves because it came up. So ostensibly you've been handling CUI the right way the entire time and you've had all the controls in place. The reality is that's not true, right? And so folks have there's the potential for CUI to be everywhere in your environment. It was stored on people's laptops, people's desktops, in SharePoint, in your Salesforce.com, in your cloud instances, depending on what your workflow is. If you didn't have, if your entire environment is not CUI compliant, you got CUI that's at places where it's not supposed to be. The government calls that spillage. It is mishandled, controlled unclassified information. And so if you have a limited environment, it may be easy for you to go through and open up a few files and look. But if you've got any substantive history of documentation, you could be looking at thousands of documents, tens of thousands of documents, and terabytes of data. That's not a task you can do manually. So there are e-discovery tools you can try to use, data loss prevention tools. We actually built a tool that does this specifically, where we actually go into an environment to do stateful lookup of CUI to find it where it's not supposed to be and put it into where it is supposed to be. So there's a before and after. Finding it, once you do find it, you're obligated to then fix it. So if you don't have a place to put it that is compliant, you haven't solved anything. So the first thing is to make sure you have a secure environment that you can actually bring it to. So either you fix your entire network or you create a place to put it, and then find where the CUI is. The government says known CUI. So it's playing a little bit of a semantic game, but don't go looking for it until you've got a secure place to put it, right? Because once you find it, it's known, and now you're obligated to go do something with it. So fix your environment first, move the known CUI into it, and then scan your environment for the unknown CUI.
Yeah. And one thing on top of it, especially if you're considering the enclave approach, if you declare an enclave, you say, this is where my CUI goes, that's the only place I want to keep it, and then spillage occurs, and that's how you wrote up your paperwork, you created a reportable cyber breach. The fact that CUI got into the wrong place, if you wrote your documentation up to state this is the only place it's going to be, right, that's something you have to actually go and report. A breach occurred. There's other ways to do that. You don't have to consider that as a breach, where instead you say, and I'm going to treat this more like a vulnerability management. I want to always continually scan my environment. I'm going to look for spillage that occurs. I'm going to treat it following my flaw remediation plan, right? I've got no different than the vulnerability patches. If it's a critical, I got to fix it in 7 days, highs, 30s, right? Those schedules, you can do that same thing with spillage. Hey, the spillage occurred. I've caught it with the scanner. I've got 30 days to move it. If it's something where it can't be moved, I've got to carry a waiver. Like literally following your vulnerability management plan it can be a way to do it. You just have to be cognizant of that whenever you go through and write your stuff, so that you're not making spillage a cyber incident, but rather a vulnerability to be mitigated.
Yeah. Another point, and I hate to keep beating this, but you may be a victim of somebody else. So someone upstream for you, or even the government sends a CUI document to a non-authorized email. The reception of that document now means you have CUI where it's not supposed to be, which is a problem for you. You may not even have intended for you to be mishandling CUI. Someone might have done that to you. And so, but you still now have to go through a remediation process with that document. Again, you're going to have a place to store it and or demonstrate that you have destroyed it to the degree that it's required by the government contract. But anyway, so I'm just saying it may not be intentional on your part, but you do, as Andy said, have to have this written into your documentation, your policies and procedures, and the archival evidence to show you're doing it. So I have a plan for it, how it's going to be handled. It's in a policy. We don't do this unless you follow these steps. Here's the procedures that we all follow. And if it should happen, this is how we're going to handle it. And oh, by the way, now we're scanning for it continually to make sure that if it does happen, we have a process for it. So it's a whole portion of that cycle.
Yeah, just quickly, and if you build these enclaves and as you're building these environments, you really need to walk through with whoever's actually supposed to be working with this data, working in the enclave, to make sure that they're using it the way you built it. You may build this environment and think, man, we've got this, we're compliant, we're all good. And you go over there and watch them actually work in it, and they're not using it the way it's supposed to be intended. So definitely get the hands-on point of view of this, make sure that people are following the procedures they're supposed to.
Right. Before I ask the last question, I want to ask the audience, are there any questions from our participants in the audience today?
On that same note that you were talking about the historical data, so I'm assuming that applies to any historical data that you have ever had, any CUI data that you have had, whatever organization.
So
And let me repeat this for the listening audience. The question is on the historical data. Does it apply to any CUI information that you have? Is that it? As long as you've been doing business with the government.
So this is a really interesting question and concept. Your DFARS rule does not say to handle CUI associated with this contract correctly. It says to handle CUI correctly. So civilian agencies today don't pass down a DFARS contract, but they do mark CUI. So you got a contract with Department of Energy that had CUI in it. You've never had a DFARS contract before. Now you contract with the DoD and it says handle CUI correctly. Does that now require you to handle your Department of Energy CUI correctly? A raw reading of the rule tells me it does. I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you exactly what that means, but that's the language that you're in right now. So historical stuff to have to go back and do other data would fall in that kind of same concept. I would argue that if you just read the rule the way it's written, the way the DFARS, it just says handle CUI correctly, not necessarily the ones with this. I could see a legal argument that it only associates to that contract. But do you really want to be trying to battle nuance clauses with, the DoD and the federal, legislators coming at you, like trying to say, no, we meant this. So, I'm sure that'll come out. There'll be some sort of precedence that'll be given in a legal case. It may already be there, and I'm just not aware of it. But that is definitely the letter of the rule says you're going to handle CUI, and you got those requirements that came in. So if it was me, I would be protecting all CUI, historical, other agencies, and know that I would apply it that way to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, and so CUI actually became a categorization with the National Archives, 2011? 2010. So, things before that was, FOUO, sensitive but unclassified, limited distribution, all those things kind of roll up now into the CUI moniker. I would take a very pragmatic approach. I would look at what your current DoD contracts are, and I would follow that workflow to identify your CUI within that. And, I'm not a lawyer either, but arguing that you really want to make sure you're handling things that are appropriately marked and marked correctly, meaning someone in the government marked it, controlled unclassified, it's marked correctly. There's not an obligation at the moment for you to try to figure out what the government may or may not have meant when they gave a document. If it's not stamped, controlled unclassified information correctly according to the National Archives, then it's not on you to try to go discover what they meant by that, 15, 20 years ago. So I would start with what is appropriately and correctly marked as CUI, and I would start with your most current stuff and work your way back, right? So that's just because the government will care more about what's data that's current than they would that something happened 15 or 20 years ago, right? And there are companies that do schematics, etc., that they use reference documents that they haven't changed in 25 years. They just update it, with new control panel locations and those kind of things. So they do inherit a lot of older archival data that may or may not be marked correctly. But again, I would focus on what is marked correctly and worry about the other stuff as phase 2.
And one more thing, when it comes to the old stuff, you can help yourself a lot here by putting in a data retention policy, just getting rid of that old data, right? You don't need that stuff that's 20 years old inside your environment. It's not accurate anymore. It's just risk, right? So, how do you figure out what my data retention policy should be? Is it 3 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever? One of the strategies I've seen utilized in the past was you go and you look at your statutes of repose and limitation. What's the last time I can be sued over that contract? Keep it through that period and then get rid of it. It could be something like a 10-year data, but now you go and you look, I've got all this data, but it's going back 30, 40 years. I can cut off, just put everything older than X date, just jump it right now. I don't have to look in there. I don't need that anymore. I mean, maybe you flag a couple of important things in there and keep it, but limit that exposure, shrink out down your risk pool.
Not to mention, it's incredibly expensive to keep data in a high environment that you don't need. Like it's just wasteful dollars, right? Like I would purge just for the sake of purging, but then it's a cost measure as well. Like don't move data you don't have to move into a really expensive storage repository.
Any other questions from the audience? All right, before I ask the last question, this last question reminded me of something I read today, this morning, and actually of why we need CMMC, the purpose of it. The reason that CMMC is so important, our adversaries and nefarious characters, how they've been able to get into our systems, steal our vital national security secrets, is not necessarily they've been able to hack into our government systems,
Correct.
or even the big primes. They've been able to go into the subs of the subs of the subs and work their way up, and it's done irreparable harm to the national security of this country. And I'm one who believes that CMMC is something that its time is long overdue and needs to be implemented throughout the government. This morning I read where the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force Academy, not the Academy, but the Chief of the United States Air Force, 4-star, made an observation. Lo and behold, he said, it's amazing that the new fighter jet from communist China looks an awful lot like our F-35. Well, I wonder why. I wonder why. So this is the question. Do you foresee CMMC rolling out to other government sectors?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes. I mean, the GSA has already said that they are going to, their intent is to follow the same protocol and requirements of CMMC. I think there's, as with anything in the government, there's always going to be a wait and see. How hard is this to implement? How long does it take to get implemented, et cetera? But the reality is, this level of inspection and requirement and compliance is long overdue. It really is. Again, we've been kidding ourselves by thinking we're compliant. Now, I said earlier a little bit tongue in cheek that the government doesn't care about you; they care about their data. That part's true, but the reality is, and the part I brought up with cybercrime is that, look, this is an existential threat to your business, not just the government, right? Cybercrime and the data breaches. We are seeing nation states actually covering espionage with cybercrime-like activity, like ransomware attacks that are actually hiding data theft for espionage purposes, right? But that means you got twofold. Now you've got data loss that's sensitive to the government, but you've also got operational outage that's impacting your business. So look, the controls of 800-171 are a phenomenal framework to implement for your business, period. They're the things that you should be doing to protect your business. They literally are the best practices. The level of inspection to go to prove you're doing it, is there for the compliance piece, but for the security piece, it's just good to do. Are all those controls going to be feasible in a commercial environment to every degree? Probably not. I mean, it makes it very restrictive. It makes it very hard to surf the internet, for example, right? Other than control. So it does lock your company down to a high degree. That said, you will be in a much more secure place for a business if you followed 800-171 even loosely. But again, the reality is other government agencies are looking to this. They're going to look to see the success of this program. The framework's already there. 800-171's already, it's been published for a while now, and people are going to start adopt it as a rule. Like 853 was for the government side, 800-171, I do believe will become the default de facto standard for commercial industry doing business with all government agencies in the next 5 years.
Hey, Van, this is Ken Bible. Can I jump into that one?
Yes, sir.
So before I left DHS, I was co-chairing a task force across federal government looking at how could you find harmonization. I think we'll still see some of that come through in legislation about harmonizing cybersecurity regulations across the government. And I do believe that NIST and 800-171, 800-172 will end up being that harmonization and that standardization. So whether or not the assessment process that is CMMC will go across government, that's probably the one we've got to kind of wait and see, because there are some really interesting dynamics looking at, say, a small agency, and I don't want to call out specifics, but somebody that deals primarily overseas in the economy of a foreign nation. it's not going to be very feasible for those companies in that foreign country they're not going to spend the money, nor do they care about our particular standard for DoD. But they will meet some sort of international standard. So one of the things I think we want to be able to look at is how can we start to have some validated standard, whether it's ISO or NIST or any of the other international standards for cybersecurity, and be able to hold something that can be independently validated. And that becomes the more important piece of it, whether it's through statistical validation or whether it's through a third-party assessor. But I just wanted to throw that in there. I think 171, NIST 800 171 is absolutely a great benchmark. That's what NIST is all about, is trying to find internationally adoptable things that can be put forth for the federal government to use. But the assessment piece and how do we hold vendors accountable to that, I think that's a little bit of the wait and see, but DoD certainly got a good start with what they've done with CMMC. Thanks a lot.
John, I think you started to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in higher ed, we're already seeing and hearing about this, where other research, like NIH, thinking about how we may need to build additional enclaves, or can we use our existing enclave we're building for 800 171, preparing for this now. So I do definitely think it's going to be rolled out. Hopefully they won't be just like us two, and you got to do this and you got to be compliant this quickly, right? Because it is a lot, but we're already thinking this is going to go this way.
That's great. Any other thoughts?
So, well, one of the analogies I always like to talk about, like, is this coming and is it needed? You know, if I want to go to your house and install a toilet, I need to be licensed and certified, go take a test, you know, all these things. If I want to go sell cybersecurity services to your bank, all I got to do is convince them I can, right? There's no requirement. There's no licensure. Congress has proven time and time again, they're not going to address this at the legislature. So it's got to, like, this is a clear and present danger to the warfighter. It's a clear and present danger to the government. You saw it in the SolarWinds Orion. The entire government gets breached via the supply chain, right? It's like, how many times do we have to take the lick before we learn the lesson? So it's got to be done. And the power of the purse seems to work, right? That's where we're going to do it via contracting vessels and contractual flow downs. It seems that thing's going to work. And if you just step back and how are they ever going to achieve this risk mitigation? I mean, it really does feel like it may not be CMMC in the present day gets rolled out to everybody, but something has to happen. And it does feel like this is the genesis of more of a government-wide protection.
And please don't, I mean, this is where the educators here are really come into play. The fact of the matter is it is an esoteric skill, right? I mean, these are not the level of knowledge that you need to do this and do this well, both technically and as far as business operations. And it's just not the simple IT. This is, how do I make IT in a secure way to protect the equities of the business or government agency? But the reality is, Andy is really spot on. Any one of these vendors that are, the RPO, et cetera, maybe have a cursory knowledge, maybe they have in-depth knowledge. You're not going to know that until you ask some very difficult questions of those vendors, because there isn't. I think actually this is why CMMC is so important, because it does provide at least a third-party attestation. So you have to actually go to the Cyber AB. You'll have to, attend courses, demonstrate proficiency. So there's a level of that to becoming an assessor where we're showing a minimum barrier of knowledge to know, which I think is important, because if you went to a managed security service provider yesterday or before CMMC was thought of, you literally, it's like buying a used car. I don't know what I'm going to get till I plug it in my environment and it works or doesn't work, right? And that's a terrifying thing when you're talking about skills as esoteric as cybersecurity. So I think the programs that Limestone have and Clemson and other institutions in South Carolina really are leading the efforts here in the workforce, and partnering with them to ensure that you've got the right people working for you, and that you're investing enough in that portions of your business is really key. So I think it's part legislation, it's part good practice, it's got good policy. It's also ensuring that you've got a highly educated workforce that can do this level of work. None of it will work in a vacuum. They all have to play out as you move through. So ask your vendors good questions, ensure that your employees are well trained, and then make sure that you understand as a business what the impacts of that 800-171 framework are.
The thoughts? Well, I want to thank the panelists. This was a great panel. And I really want to thank again these organizations that came together to make this happen. The South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance, Clemson University, Limestone University, and Cape Endeavors, all South Carolina entities. You're each leading the way. I want to thank you for doing this and helping to provide the resource that our business community and others need in South Carolina. For closing remarks, before I turn them over to him, I do want to thank someone who's, because he's got a great computer science and cybersecurity background. And of course, that's Dr. Clements, the president of Clemson. But when I've talked to him in the past, he's always been so responsive and eager and wanting to do these kinds of educational programs for the people of the state because he sees it as consistent with Clemson's land grant mission. And with that, for our closing remarks, we'll turn it over to Dr. Jim Clements, the president of Clemson University. Dr. Clements.
Thank you, Governor McMaster, distinguished guests, speakers, and attendees for leading, engaging, and participating in the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Training. And thank you to those who work with Clemson University to make this outstanding educational seminar happen, including the South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance, Limestone University, and Cape Endeavors. This is a very timely seminar since being CMMC compliant is now required for companies doing business with the United States Department of Defense. The cybersecurity challenges we face today and that we will continue to face in the future are unlike anything we have seen before. Cybersecurity is critical for South Carolina businesses, our workforce, our customers, our reputation, and our culture. All of those are built on trust. We are changing the way we teach and the way we learn in an increasingly complex digital environment, and we must ensure that our data is protected and secure. Clemson University was founded as a land-grant institution with a mission of teaching, research, and service to the state of South Carolina and beyond. And we were founded with a vision to provide people with a path to a better future through the transformational power of education. And not just a better future for an individual, but for entire communities and society as a whole. Our challenges today are different than the challenges we faced in 1889 when Clemson was founded, but our mission and vision are still the same. Clemson is committed to transforming lives and to making a positive difference in our communities and in the world. And together we can all work to elevate our core missions and our visions even further. The future is now. Together we can work to meet the needs of commercial and governmental institutions and prepare a cyber workforce with the skills necessary to thrive in an ever-changing landscape. You heard about cybersecurity from some of the top experts and leaders across the entire country. Each of them is here to help you gain the skills and knowledge you need to ensure that your businesses can continue to perform at the highest possible levels. After today, if you have any questions, or if we can be a resource or partner with you, Clemson and our partners from this seminar would be happy to connect with you. As a resource, Clemson will share the seminar from today online so that the South Carolina business community and others can navigate the cybersecurity requirements of working with the Department of Defense and combat numerous cyber threats. Thank you again for being a part of the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Training today. May God bless you all and go Tigers!